Pack your things. This isn't your house anymore. My daughter-in-law said it calmly, almost politely, like she was asking a guest to leave after dinner. I stood in the living room of the house I had slept in for 20 years. The same living room where my son had taken his first steps. The same walls that held every birthday photo, every Christmas memory. And now she was standing there with folded arms, looking at me like I was an inconvenience. My son sat beside her on the couch, silent. That silence hurt more than her words. You should have moved out after Harold died, she continued, adjusting the sleeve of her expensive sweater. This house belongs to Daniel now. We need space. Daniel, my son. He avoided my eyes. For a moment, I felt the sting of humiliation crawl up my spine. The urge to scream, to cry, to remind them who built this home. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded slowly. Of course, I said. Because by that point, I already knew something they didn't. And that tiny detail was about to change everything. I still remember the first time I met her. Emily walked into my kitchen 6 years ago, holding a pie she clearly hadn't baked. The store label was still on the bottom. But she smiled sweetly. Mrs. Carter, I've heard so much about you. Back then, Daniel looked at her like she hung the moon. I tried to like her, truly. After Harold died, Daniel was all I had left. If Emily made him happy, that was enough for me. At first, things were pleasant. Sunday dinners, polite conversations, laughter that sounded real enough. But something about Emily always felt rehearsed, too perfect, too calculated. The shift happened after their wedding. Small things at first. My favorite chair suddenly redecorated out of the living room. My cooking replaced with meal delivery services. My voice in my own house slowly becoming background noise. Emily never yelled. She didn't need to. Her weapon was suggestion. Maybe your mom would be more comfortable in a smaller place. Maybe it's time she had her independence. Each sentence wrapped in concern. Each one pushing me a little closer to the door. Daniel didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. Then the real clues started appearing. Bank letters addressed only to Daniel. Contractor visits I wasn't told about. Conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. One evening, I walked past the kitchen and heard Emily whispering. We can sell it for almost double. Once she's out. The house. My house. I stood there quietly, listening. Daniel hesitated. It still feels wrong. Emily's voice sharpened. Your mother doesn't need a house this big. And we could finally move downtown. That was the moment everything became clear. This wasn't about space. It was about money. And I was the obstacle. I didn't confront them. Not then. Instead, I started preparing. Quietly. Patiently. You see, when Harold and I bought this house 30 years ago, we made a decision that seemed insignificant at the time. A legal detail buried in paperwork. Something Daniel had never paid attention to. Over the next few weeks, I made a few phone calls. Met with a lawyer. Reviewed documents that had been sitting untouched in a safe deposit box. Every step felt like setting chess pieces on a board. Meanwhile, Emily became more confident. More bold. She stopped pretending to like me. Which led us right back to the living room. 2 weeks should be enough time, she said. Still standing there with that polite smile. Daniel finally spoke. Mom, maybe it's just time. Time. Funny word. I looked around the room slowly. Then I walked over to the coffee table and placed a single envelope on it. Emily frowned. What's that? Just a tiny detail, I replied. Daniel opened the envelope. At first he didn't react. Then his eyebrows pulled together. Mom, what is this? Emily grabbed the paper from his hands. And the color drained from her face, because the document was the original property deed, with 2 names listed. Harold Carter and Margaret Carter. Me. Not Daniel. Not Emily. And below that was the second document. A legal trust agreement Harold and I created years ago. One very specific clause highlighted in yellow. The house could never be sold, transferred, or inherited. Without my written consent, and if I ever chose to leave the property, ownership transferred not to Daniel, but to a housing charity we had quietly supported for decades. Emily read the line twice. Wait, this means... Yes, I said calmly. This house isn't Daniel's. Silence filled the room like thick smoke. Daniel looked at me stunned. You never told me. You never asked. Emily's voice turned sharp. So what, you're just going to hold this over us? I smiled for the first time that evening. No, Emily. I'm simply staying in my home. Another pause. Then I added one last piece. And since you both seem to need more space, I gestured toward the front door. You're welcome to find another house. Daniel looked torn apart. Emily looked furious. But neither of them had any power left in that room. Because the one thing Emily had underestimated was the quiet woman she thought she could push aside. 3 months later, they moved into a small apartment across town. The house is quiet again, peaceful. Sometimes Daniel visits alone. He's different now, humbled. Emily hasn't come back once. And honestly, that's perfectly fine with me. Because the funny thing about betrayal is this. People think strength is loud. They think revenge is explosive. But the most powerful move you can make is simply knowing something they don't, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it.